To the gates of State House they trooped, and cordial the reception appeared, complete with a word of prayer. But then the cameras stopped rolling, and for a reported 4 hours, talks between President William Ruto and Chief Justice Martha Koome continued behind closed doors of State House, Nairobi, now under renovation. The meeting ended quietly with a short statement declaring the commitment of the arms of government to the principles of the Constitution. But beyond the renewal of constitutional vows, what else came out of the three arms get-together? We sneak in through the renovation cracks for a glimpse of the summit. And tonight, a guest gangster takes the questions as we walk through the contentious Social Health Insurance Fund, SHIF, and the regulations guiding the fund. The take, kicker, and sense are all rolled into one tonight as we ponder the state of education funding in the country. The News Gang is here.
When the CJ is seen with the president, they are discussing matters on administration of justice, that everybody is responsible. It's not a beauty contest who serves Kenya better, as if the executive, the judiciary. We are all in it. So if the judiciary is failing, the economy is failing because disputes are not being resolved. The president gets affected and everybody gets affected.
Welcome to the show, gentlemen, and to you, our viewers. I'll explain the context of that in a minute, but just to remind you that we have Cabinet Secretary for Health, Susan Nakhumicha-Wafula, who will be here to answer all of your questions. I've already seen some of them coming through. The hashtag is NewsGang. Anything you want to know, she's here to answer all of those questions. But first, let's talk about that meeting. And like we said, there was renewal of vows to the Constitution. Let's be clear. And we thought it fit to start on a TBT note with that statement from then she was not Chief Justice Martha Koome. It was in April of 2021. That was during her vetting exercise. So, gentlemen, was it a beauty contest after all, or not? Lena, I'll start with you.
Quite an interesting summit, it must be said, considering what preceded it, which is a lot of noise, especially in the political rallies, complaints by the executive led by President William Ruto that the judiciary was impeding or standing in the way of government projects. And, there was one particular one he spoke about, the road that crosses the game park in Nyandarua, and we expected that there'll be details of that in this meeting. But you remember that what came out was a short statement from the State House spokesperson, Hussein Mohammed, basically saying what you are saying, which is a renewal of vows, that we commit ourselves to respecting the principle of separation of powers. We commit ourselves to respecting the independence of institutions. So there was little that came out in the manner of the issues in contention. So it looks to me like they played nice after all. They stopped at some point because the issues that was to be canvassed were actually very difficult to be submitted into a forum like that for a discussion, because the issues were principally around the independence of the judiciary, one, and two, the decisional independence of judges. Remember, just a few days before this summit, in what now was supposed to be a revelation and leading the way in terms of submitting the complaints, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, went for one of the judges and said, they decided against me, so that was misconduct, and I'm going to send a petition. So one would have expected that, okay, give us the details. And I just want us to listen to President Ruto talking about corruption in the judiciary and how the judiciary is sabotaging the government.
Hawa watu wote wakora na wezi na wafisadi ndio ilisababisha jana tukaketi chini na Chief Justice na viongozi spika wa bunge na tumekubaliana kukabiliana na wafisadi wote pamoja na wakora na matapeli na hawa land grabbers. Na mkutano wa jana ni kwa sababu kama serikali, as the entire three arms of government, tumekubaliana ya kwamba ufisadi inarudisha nchi yetu nyuma. Ukora na utapeli inakwamisha maendeleo na transformation ya nchi yetu ya Kenya.
Yeah, that's the statement there, Sam and Yvonne. You remember initially the complaint was corruption is rife in the judiciary. But the statement, and again confirmed by President Ruto there, now said, no, corruption is affecting the three arms of government. So it stopped being just about the judiciary and went on to become a problem of the three arms of government. So you could see a polite departure from what was obviously impossible to put to the summit as a discussion. You can't sit, whether as President, Chief Justice, or even the JSC, to discuss the decisional independence of judges. That is guaranteed in the Constitution, that a judge enjoys decisional independence and cannot be victimized for the decisions that they take in the course of administration of justice.
But you know, what's interesting, and I think we'd raised this on the show last week, is, you know, like you said, there was some very heavy rhetoric. In fact, it goes beyond rhetoric, and were some serious accusations and allegations against senior members of the judiciary. What happens when you do that and when you taint the names of persons like these in the public domain? And remember, judges function differently. They are not like politicians who can go stand on a podium and get into, you know, a rebuttal sort of situation where they can defend themselves. But what happens when you have laid such heavy allegations? Then you say, okay, you know, we'll hold, and then you have a meeting and some of these things aren't raised. Remember, the judge or judges continue to hear cases for hundreds of thousands of Kenyans. Do they now start to doubt, you know, the integrity of the judges whose names have been, you know, cast aspersions on? That is one of the things for me, and that's what always happens in these cases. You throw mud at it and then you know, go behind closed doors and talk. That's one thing. But let's say there is corruption in the judiciary, because there is, just like there is anywhere else. So these talks have solved the corruption issue. These talks have solved what the president and others were saying is judges and litigants openly engaging in bribe-taking to sway the outcome of cases. So what happens now? If there are indeed some serious cases, what are we to do now that we've had secret talks for 4.5 hours, of which we, you know, do not know the exact contents of it? And that's, you know, that's where we are. Then here we are back to square one, except for the fact that nothing has been solved, seemingly anyway.
Right. Secret talks. Look, if you...
Private, secret, quiet.
Confidential.
Confidential.
If you look at the images that were sent from State House, I don't know that you were able to look at the sequence of how they follow, because you will see everyone in a room standing up, then a door opens and the president and the Chief Justice emerge. So they walk into a room that has Speaker Wetangula, Council of Governors Chair Anne Waiguru, you have the Attorney General. On this other side, you have Deputy Chief Justice, that is Philomena Mwilu, and the Acting Registrar of the Supreme Court, but also Acting Registrar of the Judicial Service Commission, or of course other members. The President and the Chief Justice come in, well, the President and the President of the Supreme Court, they walk in, and the President of the Republic leads the people in prayer. And after that, we see people sitting and looking at each other, shifting glances and what have you. That's the footage. But I think there has to be some direct talks between the President of the Republic and the President of the Supreme Court that we didn't see. Otherwise, I don't know how you'd explain the sequence of footage that you have the president and the CJ emerging from a certain direction. But then again, when you study the statement that came from State House and talking about that decisions were made, that there will be more resources allocated to the judiciary to help them deal with corruption. And in fact, there are some other interpretations that those judges' priority would be on dealing with corruption matters. So 25 judges of the High Court, 11 judges of the Court of Appeal. But I'm not convinced that it had to take a meeting of the President and the Chief Justice for them to sit and agree that actually there are more resources needed to hire new judges, because it is not the work of the President to decide how many more judicial officers are supposed to be hired. Indeed, it is the work of the Judicial Service Commission to come up with a strategic plan and say we need this many judges, we need this many magistrates, we need
over
this many
the next period
judicial
of
officers.
time, yeah.
Exactly. Then once they decide that in the next 1 year we need to hire this many, like for instance in this case 36 judges, High Court and the Court of Appeal, what is the budget implication?
Budget, yeah.
If you need budget, there's now the Judiciary Fund that has been operationalized, meaning that resources that come to the judiciary stick there. They never leave. It is up to the judiciary to decide on how to spend it.
Yeah.
So if they are not sufficient, there is a committee that they speak to. It is called the Justice Legal Affairs Committee of the National Assembly. That is the link. You go and because Parliament is allowed by the Constitution, that it is the one that allocates, it is the one that appropriates funds. It is not the President, it is not the executive that does that work. How it's supposed to work, it is that the National Assembly, or Parliament if you call it, is the one that is supposed to be sharing these resources. So the right place for the judiciary on demanding for more resources because of 1, 2, 3, 4 is the Justice Legal Affairs Committee. We didn't need that meeting. The other thing that we also see in that statement is them agreeing that every arm of government is going to come up with the proposals which will be presented to the National Council on Administration of Justice. Yeah. Remember last week we spoke about the NCAJ, which in the first place is a meeting point where all institutions involved in the justice sector meet to come up with reforms that need to be put in place. So why did it have to take a meeting of the President, the Chief Justice and the Speaker of the National Assembly and the Council of Governors representation to say that indeed we need to take some submissions before the NCAJ. Indeed, that is what they ordinarily do. But then again, the statement says that the proposals from each arm will go to the NCAJ. So then what? So the Chief Justice is the one who chairs that committee. What is she supposed to do with that information? Is there supposed to be any reference to the meeting of the three arms of government, or the NCAJ continues with its work like nothing ever happened? But again, this afternoon, you see the statement coming from the Kenya Magistrates and Judges Association, and it's very deep if you look at it. They're actually saying that despite that meeting, the tripartite meeting of the three heads of the three arms of government, there still continues to be a bit of abuse, or is it intimidation of judges and judicial officers, if you may call them. And they are saying that this has to stop. They're also saying that actually it appears that the political class that has been hurling insults at the judiciary or the judges and the magistrates, or sort of name-calling, they have a certain political persuasion. So for me, looking at that statement coming from the Magistrates and the Judges Association, it is telling as far as the sort of position and how much of disruption is coming in all these matters.
And there we have it then, and you would understand the Magistrates and Judges Association, because statements were made about we will defy court orders that come from corrupt judges. That statement is still out there and lingering. Who the corrupt judges are, we don't know. Whether they've gone through the process that then actually determines definitively, a court process that then says so-and-so is corrupt and therefore, the processes take place thereafter, that has not happened. Instead, we've had talks. And again, then you have all these lingering sort of bad blood. Do they then walk back these statements? We don't know. I'd like us to listen to the President, who just the day after that meeting sought to explain on why he met the Chief Justice, who's the President of the court.
Jana, nimekubali pia ya kwamba serikali itatoa pesa tuajiri mahakimu zaidi. Na hawa mahakimu zaidi ambao tunawaajiri ni wale wataenda katika section ya anti-corruption, wengi wao. Ndio wale wafisadi ambao ni sugu, tukabiliana na wao.
So, you understand the budget process better than I do. Where is this money coming from? Because ideally, the allocations are already done at the start of the financial year. If there are changes, there's a supplementary budget. We already had a supplementary budget, so where does this money come from?
I don't know.
For the new judges.
I don't know.
But you do notice a pattern here with this, because remember there was the Judiciary Fund, which he then said this grants Judiciary its independence. They can do what they want with it. And you notice it's, for lack of a better word, goodies. It's like carrot and stick. So goodies, money, and then criticism, and then, here's money. No. To the extent that you wonder whether then the judiciary becomes subservient to the executive and thankful, grateful almost, like, thank you, you gave us the Judiciary Fund. Thank you, you're giving us more money to hire more judges. There's something about the implications and the perceptions of that. The other thing I wanted to say is when you have a meeting like that and we don't know the contents of the discussion that was had behind closed doors, and you've got cases in which, the government has a stake that are coming up, it already creates the perception, or does it, that let us say, for instance, tomorrow the housing levy, we're expecting a decision on that, whichever way it goes. But if it goes the way of the government, there are questions about, does that have anything to do with, was there any discussion around this? And so whether or not the courts make this decision based on the evidence before them and the law guided by the Constitution, there is already a perception that's been created about we are working well together and we will not allow anyone to sabotage government projects. So I think just in terms of perception, I don't know what exactly this does for the decisions that are made by the court, whether they're made, even if they're made well with, all things considered in a court process. But after a meeting like this, then, people would start to look at things with a second eye.
Yes, and on the perception front, State House was ahead of the game compared to the judiciary. Remember, the statement started with, this meeting has been requested by the judiciary. So that is the first ball that actually was thrown in the direction of the JSC and the Chief Justice. That's one. On the second bit, on the perception front, the JSC and the Chief Justice in particular fails by not explaining, just the same way she and the JSC had a press conference before all these things happened. And in the course of the questions from our reporters, she said, we are ready to meet the president. Now, this meeting took place, and I think, just to take care of the perception front, an explanation or a statement should have come out of the JSC, for example, just saying, this is what was agreed. But unless they are actually saying they also co-own the statement from State House. Because there is also, you talk of carrot and stick, but we also don't know whether in the course of those deliberations, instead of the issues being discussed about graft and all that, maybe the team from the judiciary said, give us cars, give us more judges and things like that. To which then the whole thing has been turned on its head because that was not the agenda. That is not the reason Kenyans expected. Kenyans were told this meeting is going to take place. So on the perception front, accountability and coming out in the open would usually take care of that. Otherwise, there will be a lot of these questions of what really transpired. And the narrative at the moment has been controlled entirely by State House.
Yes.
They
issued the statement.
Yes, they issued the statement.
We didn't hear anything from the judiciary, the JSC. Yeah. It was one statement. It came from State House. It was short. It was brief on details.
And the president specifically goes out with some of the elements.
Exactly.
That tomorrow we're giving them cars and we are going to appoint judges. And most of those judges will go to the anti-corruption
Exactly.
courts.
And all this time we hear nothing from the judiciary in terms of this was how, the meeting went. These were our deliberations. So you can see that the Chief Justice is the one who requests a meeting. The executive, graciously grants their request for a meeting. The meeting happens at State House behind closed doors. It's like, with each of those moves,
And actually,
you can tell who is,
They
and
can
yet it's
say
supposed to be.
anything.
Yeah,
They can
that's
say
right.
anything, yes.
it's actually a bit untidy because the statement from State House, paragraph 5C, says that among the other things that were agreed upon is the resources will also be provided to conclude the vehicle leasing program to facilitate the judiciary's transport needs. I say untidy because as we speak right now, there's already a court case where someone is complaining that the SRC is dictating on the working conditions of judicial officers. Of course, the Salaries and Remuneration Commission is saying that they have the mandate to determine what benefits should accrue to state officers in the judiciary. There's the question about the mode of transport. Of course, there has been a claim that previously there was a car program that was given to judges, especially so that every few years they get a new car. So that has been taken to court. Now you have State House saying that more resources will be allocated to provide transport for judicial officers or for the judiciary. So then you're left surprised because on one hand, there are people, including the Judicial Service Commission, that is saying there are certain rights that should be accorded to the judges. But then this State House or executive is saying we're going to provide more resources for cars, leasing of cars. So you cannot lease a car, but also given personal transport, a car that you use for your personal use and can be changed every other 4 years. So really, that mix-up is not tidy as you walk this journey.
Yeah, and we will wait to see what happens tomorrow and in the days to come. A point to note that the judgment in the case on the housing levy comes up tomorrow at, 9:30 in the morning? So we shall see how that goes and, of course, what else happens. Listen, by day, she runs the country's health sector. Tonight, she'll be a gangster on matters health. She is here. The Cabinet Secretary in charge of Kenya's health is joining us as a guest gangster on the show tonight. We want to understand everything to do with the Social Health Insurance Fund. Send in your questions. The hashtag is NewsGang. That's how we're going to be tracking some of your questions and your comments on this. What do you want to understand better? Remember, public participation is now currently ongoing. Maybe this is your opportunity as well to get better understanding of this fund that is coming up. That is all on NewsGang right after this very short break. Do stay with us.